So now more than ever, I think more people are considering the homeschooling approach and wondering what that looks like. I know that it appeals to a lot of people at this point, but I've had a lot of people reach out and say, where do I even start? What do I consider? Is it something I can do? Will I have to go back to work at some point? So how can I possibly do it? Hey guys, this week's video is going to be significantly different than other videos we've done before. When we started this channel, it was almost exclusively to show you our schoolie build and what that looked like. But as we were creating stuff, we realized that a huge part of our lives that we also wanted to share was the fact that we homeschool or unschool our children. So the kind of people who are going to be converting a school bus and traveling or living an alternative lifestyle in general, which is probably the type of audience we're going to attract. You have to look into different ways to educate your children if you do have children. So also with everything going on with the whole pandemic of COVID-19 and things like that, and the new regulations or guidelines they're going to have for reopening schools, I know there's a lot of people that are rethinking traditional education and if they're going to re-enroll their kids or if they're going to homeschool. And I also know that a lot of people that are currently homeschooling their children because of this pandemic, but are still working within the guidelines of the school system, are really struggling. The expectations on them and the teachers are really kind of unfair and hard for them to work around. So wanted to offer some guidance in regards to how you could even start the process. The very first step, if you're considering homeschooling, is check your local laws. They differ drastically state to state. When we first started considering it, we lived in Washington State, and the rules there are pretty relaxed. You don't even have to begin schooling your child until they're 8 years old. So you're free to kind of do whatever you want until your child is that old. So if your child is about to go into kindergarten and you live somewhere with similar laws, you don't even have to worry about this right now. The second step, if you're considering homeschooling, is if your child is currently enrolled in a public school system, you're gonna have to withdraw them. Some school districts, that's as simple as sending a letter of intent, making a phone call to a school principal. There's various ways to go about this. Again, you have to refer to your local laws to see what you have to do, but it's a much simpler process than people realize. When our oldest son was in kindergarten, we had just moved to St. Louis. We were worried about him meeting new people, making new friends, so we enrolled him in kindergarten even though we had initially planned on homeschooling him. By the time we hit spring break of his kindergarten year, we knew that school wasn't going to work for us. He did have the opportunity to make some friends, that was nice, but the rules and regulations and the expectations for him in kindergarten already just were a bit too much beyond what we thought was appropriate for his age group, beyond what we thought fit for our family or made sense, or for the kind of life we wanted him and our family to lead. When we withdrew our oldest son from kindergarten in Missouri, we had to put together a letter saying that we were withdrawing him and we intended to homeschool him. We had to take it to the school board, and then we went to the school as a courtesy to let his teacher and the principal know. The process was really quick. It took us one afternoon and it wasn't a big deal. They of course asked questions like, what kind of curriculum are you going to use? Why are you withdrawing him? Did we do something wrong? But it was a very calm and kind process and not a big deal. A big thing I hear from a lot of people as far as a concern about homeschooling is, gosh, homeschooling would be super great, but I have to work and my husband has to work, or I'm a single parent, or whatever. So the idea is that the ability to homeschool your child is a luxury or a privilege, and don't get me wrong, it is in some ways. However, the misconception there is that when you homeschool your child, you have to be at home with them from 9 to 4 or 8 to 5 or whatever, schooling them constantly, sitting in a room teaching them and literally doing school at home. And that's just not the case. I think a lot of parents are realizing, as they're schooling their children at home with the help of the teachers and all these Zoom meetings and things they're doing because of COVID-19, they're realizing, hey, my kid's getting his work done in like an hour a day, 2 hours a day, 3. I mean, it depends on what grade level they're at, right? But it's not a whole 6 to 8 hour day thing. So you absolutely can work and still homeschool your children. It can be a joint effort between you and your partner. It can be a joint effort between you and other family members, where maybe during the times that you do have to work, they can stay with a family member. Or, I mean, the options are endless. If you're willing to get creative and it's something that's truly a priority to you, you can make it work. So you just have to decide what's important, and if you're willing to work hard to make it happen, and then you really can. Get rid of the idea that you can't work and homeschool as well. Shane and I have done various different things. At one point he was in chiropractic school. At one point we were both working part-time jobs. Another time he was working full-time, or I was. It's been all over the place, and we've made it work because it's important to us, and it's really like priority number one in how we live our lives. So you can make it work. Another big thing to look at is the types of schooling, and be realistic with the kind of person you are and the kind of teaching you're comfortable with. Again, you have to look back at the laws. Some states, any parent can school their child. In other states, you have to either have a college degree, a bachelor's degree at the least, or attend some kind of class where you get certified to be a teacher for your child at home. Again, it differs state to state, so check those laws and see if you're able to do that. But the types of schooling are important, right? You can literally school at home, where you take the classroom out of a public school and you put it into your house. Have, you know, the maps and the whiteboards and the curriculum and the workbooks and spelling tests, whatever that looks like for you. But it can be school at home. And if that's something that your children really like, that kind of thing, and you do too, and that's what makes you comfortable, do it. That's always an option. There's also Charlotte Mason. I'm not going to go into all of the details around these types of homeschooling. A quick Google search will get you the details around them. There's Charlotte Mason, there's Waldorf, there's unschooling, which is what we do for the most part. There are unit studies. There's multiple other different philosophies, but there's also eclectic homeschooling, where you just kind of pull bits and pieces from every type of schooling that you like. And that's, if I had to say what we were, I would say we are eclectic unschoolers. We do a little bit of everything. I like the rhythms of Waldorf. I like the freedom of unschooling. You know, and there's some good things about Charlotte Mason too. So there's really not as many rules when you homeschool as there are when your child's in a public school. So if you're interested in finding new ways to educate your child, or if you're tired of the way the school is handling it, then this is definitely something to look into. Another big thing to check out if you're considering homeschooling is what resources do you have available, right? Do you live close to a library? Do you live close to a zoo, or an aquarium, or, you know, we had a science center and a children's museum and all these things in St. Louis, and we have a lot of that here in Charleston too. We haven't gotten to access it much since COVID stuff, but, you know, do you live in an area where you have access to these things? That being said, you can absolutely homeschool your child if you have access to just a library. I think if you live super far away from a library and for some reason the library membership isn't attainable, that homeschooling would be difficult, but still totally possible. But I think, you know, that's something to consider. What resources do you have access to? How often would you be able to take your children to them? What kind of schooling are you wanting to do? And then kind of assess the situation from there, and consider that as well. Consider their personality types, your personality type, what would work within your home, what would work with the hours that you or your partner work, and what resources do you have available. And within that same vein, what support system do you have available? Do you have family members that are totally on board with this and want to help and support you? Amazing, that's great, because then they can help you watch your children or join the process, right? Take your kids to a zoo one day, or take them to the library, or maybe you have an uncle who's super good at math and your kid's super into math, or a cousin who's into astronomy, or whatever, right? Like what kind of support system and resources do you have available, and what can you make work? Last, I think it's important to mention that if you plan on pulling your child out of school, that there's going to be a time where you should go through a deschooling effort, where basically the idea is that your child has been in an environment where they're kind of told how to go about their day, what to learn, when to learn it, the rules of learning it. It's a very structured environment, and if you're going to pull them out and bring them home and allow them a lot of freedom, because you're not going to do just the classical like at home school, then you need to consider that your child has maybe turned off a bit of their brain where they seek out opportunities to learn. So the deschooling process can sometimes scare parents. It can look like, my God, my kid's just wanting to watch TV or play video games, or they're arguing about workbook practice or whatever. Well, of course they are. The idea to them is, cool, I'm not in school anymore. What do I have to do? Nothing. There's no bell. There's no lunchtime I have to make it to, things like that. So allow them the time to kind of unwind from what their life has been if you're going to be taking a more laid back and non-traditional approach. I would argue that deschooling is necessary regardless of the approach you're going to take, because even if you school at home, they have to adjust to the idea of mom or dad or whoever being the teacher now, and there not being a principal's office to go to, and they're obviously more comfortable with you. There's a reason why kids are on their worst behavior with their parents. They know they can be who they are with you and you'll love them anyway. So there's definitely a process you have to go through, and don't let that scare you out of homeschooling. I'll do a video at a later date talking about deschooling a little bit more. I think it's also important to mention that you should have an exit or re-entry strategy. Let's say you decide you're going to homeschool your child and you do it for a bit and it's really not for you and it's not working, or something changes in life. You need to be prepared, if that's going to be something that happens, to have them re-enter into the public school system. Or if you just plan on homeschooling them until things go back to normal after the COVID pandemic, then that's okay too. You might want to stick to a more traditional approach that makes sure that your child is in line with the expectations of the school system, so they can make a seamless transition back in. After about, by the time we hit spring break, we just had to inform the school. When we withdrew our son from school in Missouri, God damn it.